Hey, welcome to the Screenaholics podcast. My name is Mark Dittmer, and I'm your host. And this is episode 9, which, just like episode 8, features a conversation with Mitch DeArmon. Mitch is the title I would give him as I introduce him here would be co-founder of the Man-to-Men Weekend, but that's just what he's did in the last 2 years. He and Scott Karstens co-founded the Man-to-Men Weekend in 2021. But I've known Mitch since 2015. We're both graduates of the Sterling Men's Weekend, and there's a community of graduates that interact there. And I know he has done a lot of other men's work, including was very influential. I believe he was also a co-founder of the Young Men's Ultimate Weekend. And throughout all the years of interacting with him, he's always had something to say, and usually what he has to say is worth hearing. Like, when I hear him speaking, I'm like, hey, shut up, Mitch is talking. I want to hear what he has to say. So it's an honor and a privilege to get to sit down with him and ask him questions and share those answers with you. The Man-to-Men Weekend is going to have, I believe it's the 8th Man-to-Men Weekend will be this coming March 15th, 16th, and 17th in Occidental, California. The cost is $500. The website where you can register is man-to-men.org. And it's, I can't say enough good things about it, so I'll just leave it at that and say thanks for coming to enjoy our conversation. I hope you, if you haven't already subscribed, please click subscribe. You're getting in on the ground floor. We're just, this podcast is just getting its legs beneath it. It's immature at this point, and we talk a lot about maturity in this podcast, so looking forward to recording many more episodes. If you have any ideas, someone who I ought to interview, leave it in the comments. And but thank you for your support. It means a lot to me. Really enjoy doing this, and hope to have many more conversations for you in the future. With that, let me now not delay and go ahead and present to you this conversation with Mitch DeArmon. Okay, so Mitch DeArmon, good to see you again. So I promised you reader mail, and so we spoke last time you were on the podcast about the knight in shining armor. So, but before I maybe before I read it's a short note. Do you want to just give some context on that concept for people who might not have tuned in?
Well, one of the things that I think is important as we continue to dismantle this knight in shining armor, which also plays into this very popular idea of men are protectors and providers, and that the younger men right now are trying to reestablish as their footing for manhood or sustainable or functional or validated manhood is we're all this thing, protectors and providers, and the knight in shining armor seems to exemplify the protector part of it, and I want to take it apart a little bit more so that we can see that it's a very young and immature part of it, because the idealization of that shining armor and who the knight in shining armor is in relationship with, and which is generally a damsel in distress.
Yeah, it makes me think of fairy tales. Like, yeah. What's your favorite fairy tale? Do you have anything that you think of when you think of the knight in shining armor? Like,
I normally, just always default into like she ate the poisonous apple, she fell asleep. The knight in shining armor comes in. Prince Charming.
Snow White.
Snow White is a Snow White.
Maybe.
So I'm sure I had a childhood, but I'm not sure that any of those things. I was probably interested in baseball and not in fairy tales. So, but I did get enculturated into this idea that the knight comes in, he kisses her, wakes her up, and they go off and they have this relationship. And I know that it's become somewhat comical, or at least we've made some attempts at invalidating the happily ever after concept. And I want to validate how important that is because of the maturity level in which that idea comes from. First of all, the damsel in distress who is in the relationship doesn't have any responsibility, and so I want to address that.
But actually, so there's an interesting thing about Snow White. I don't know. Have you followed it all? You know, they were going to make Disney was going to remake Snow White, and then there was some controversy because they had the actress who was going to play Snow White was interviewed, and she was kind of like, "Oh yeah, no, we're not going to do Snow White the way we used to do it. Like our heroine's not going to wait around to be kissed by a man, and it's not about her finding love. You know, she's going to be a strong woman." Like her, you know, so it was kind of like a repudiation of the. She's like, well, that was 1935, 85 years ago, and it's, you know, so it's really in need of updating. And then there's like a conservative backlash to that, where they're like, well, hey, what the hell? Snow White's the legacy of the thing, and
well, I haven't followed any of that, but I also think that there's a perspective on it, since so much of the attack on the fairy tale to begin with comes from the feminist movement, and so they want to make it about the young man and the young woman's relationship and those roles, but they're not really making it about who poisoned her. And they're not really trying to deal with this other relationship that seems to still go unaddressed about the older woman who poisoned Snow White to begin with, where she needed to be woken up first of all. And that's it's a big point, is that how many of our older women are giving life-sustaining information to younger women so that they don't fall asleep, so that they are awake.
Yeah.
Or are they just dancing them down the trail of whatever their older woman agenda is and feeding these younger women with bogus information that's putting them to sleep? Because a lot of our younger women who have adopted a feminist attitude are hugely dysfunctional in relationships.
Yeah.
Our relationship status is not getting better. So you could basically say, if you want to make it about the man-woman relationship, since that's what I get to go by, is that poisoning of the young woman by the older woman has gotten worse, because our younger women are more entitled, our younger women are more demanding, our younger women are lazier than they've ever been. They have less and less expectations on themselves for their own performance than they ever have, and are more demanding on what men should do for them, and many times it's what they can do for themselves. So what they think they deserve through this poisoned apple that they ate has gotten worse. So they can have this other attitude that the struggle is between the man and the woman, really. But I think what you're talking about is the wrong relationship.
Okay.
That relationship, that whoever said what you're talking about,
Right.
that part of the relationship needs to be addressed between the older woman and the younger woman. And we can get on to the not waiting around, which I'll support. I've never told my daughters to wait around.
Yeah.
It's like you can find a man on any corner, so why would you wait around? If you like him, you can like the next one too. You don't have to sit there and go, "Oh, he's the only one." That's a very childish mentality, which a damsel in distress would love that mentality. Because that would be the distress, right? Here's the man, here's the only man ever, and he comes around and you're already codependent. You're already way too emotionally trying to attach to the unavailable guy.
Yeah.
That's in your imagination only. It's like, yeah, so what she's saying is right, but where did the information come from?
Yeah, that makes sense. That, like, even though I've been exposed to that woman's, or that little critique of the original Snow White, it's being ridiculed a lot by people, like there's a backlash to it, but there's some parts of it that are spot on. Yeah, but yeah, in this this context, as a feminist claim, it might be missing the point, or missing one of the points.
Because I know in our last interview, one of the things we did mention was this older woman to younger woman relationship that continually goes untouched. And here's the perfect example of, we're going to talk about the boy-girl relationship, Snow White. We're not going to talk about, well, why did the older woman poison the younger woman?
Yeah.
And why isn't there somebody there with the older woman to nurture her along in her old age?
Oof, yeah.
And why is her recourse to damage the life of a younger woman? Because I'm dealing with a fair number of couples where these younger women have that damage. They're passing on feminism that doesn't work for their marriages. And then it doesn't work for how they relate to their husbands. And we can sit there and look at the stat. And these women are not looking at themselves going, how come I can't keep a husband? Like it's the most difficult trick in the world. When, 50 years ago, it wasn't that hard. 70 years ago, it was even easier. And their expectations were even less. And now they're making more demands. And if they don't get their demands met, they're getting divorces.
Yeah.
And it really has to do with the child not maturing to the point of making these demands in a childish way, where if you don't give me what I want, I'm going to leave. That's a very young attitude to have.
So this is, maybe I should, before I get to my reader's question, because the one I'm having now is like, I think we talked about the knight in shining armor as damaging to, like, it would be damaging to men to foolishly have that view, but it could be damaging to women also to have that view.
Well,
potentially
in the polarization of attitude is, which is crazy, is if it's damaging to one, it's damaging to both.
Mm-hmm.
We are a community.
Yeah.
This is one planet. We are a humanity. We're all in this together. So you can't sit there and compete for who's the most damaged. And that's one of the hierarchies of who gets to, who deserves to have government resources bestowed upon them first, is the most damaged.
Yeah.
And so there's this whole competition for claiming damages, but they have to ignore the truth in order to do that, because whether it be war, whether it be on the job, whether it be at school, our men are more damaged than our women are. It doesn't matter if it comes at the hands of other men. It doesn't matter if it comes at the force of their labor. It doesn't matter if it comes at war. It doesn't matter. Our men are dying more often from more things than women do. And so the justification of resources that is being used through dramas and traumas so that women can get these resources isn't really comparable if you compare them to who's being hurt more, men or women. And it is also true boys or girls. Boys get more injured by more things. Boys do worse at school than girls do. There's not a fair dollar amount indicated that boys are doing worse at school than girls are. It's not an equal amount. Girls are being way more funded than boys are. So if you really look at the stats and then you try to do an equal amount of funding, what they do is they go back into the past somewhere and say, well, way back here it was imbalanced. Well, way back there life was entirely different. Way back there was no grocery stores. Way back there was no cloth. There was only cloth diapers. Way back there was a whole bunch of other circumstances in life that no longer exist. And so just like we're going to get to with the taking off the armor for boys, we need some of this other dialogue to become current and not go too far in the past to justify what we're doing right now. We need to deal with right now,
mm-hmm.
and not go 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 70 years ago. We need to go right now. Here's the situation at hand.
Yeah.
More men are committing suicide than women. Why are men feeling so worthless?
Yeah. Louis C.K. has this bit about men. He has his sister's children, her son goes. She's like a world. She's got 3 boys, and they're like tornadoes. And she sits down at the couch, and she's all tired, and her son just takes sand and puts it in her tea, and he's like, and he says like. Like boys just do damage. Like they run around in circles. Like they'll run you around in circles. They run like, and he says, whereas his little daughters are like, oh, they're very, she's like, why can't I just have had girls? They're very sweet, whatever. But he's like, no, they're fucked up. Like they'll, his daughters go up to him and say like, my sister's toy broke. I want you to break. Or my toy broke. I want you to break my sister's toy so it's even, And then she makes such a deal out of it that he's like, and I did, so she stayed on me, so I did break it. You know what I mean? But like he says, for an adult, like a man will like cut your arm off and steal your truck, but a woman will break your soul. So it's this whole like. But is it possible that men? I guess to relate to what you're saying, is it possible that men are more physically, physically harmed, but women are more psychologically harmed just based on the way we're built?
I think that there is some truth to that as a possibility. I would argue the point saying that how we express the damage is different. I wouldn't say one is more damaged than the other, but I say when I start expressing the damage that I've been through, and how she, my counterpart, is expressing the damage she's been through. Like maybe she cries. Maybe I break furniture. The expression is every bit as dynamic and is every bit as results in the same kind of relief, but how we express it might be a little bit different. What we've grown to do is, because of how the ego works, is and how judgmental we are, is we've decided that this way is the valuable way, the important way, the right way, and that way is the wrong way. And we have, in all of our lack of maturity, we've swung the pendulum from one side to the other, saying which one is, and we've given it dominant attention to justify it, and we've engendered the attention, but it has nothing to do with what's effective. It just has to do with where we're putting the attention.
So another article I was exposed to was just talking about how in our political arena and especially maybe at universities, we have weaponized women's tears. So women's tears win all these arguments now because a man can't respond to a woman's tears. And a man can't, so women lead a lot of these protest movements. Now a man can't cry awkwardly in the middle of a argument, but a woman's tears, like a man has, I don't know, we just haven't known how to respond to it. I don't know if that's part of the knight in shining armor narrative, or like that because maybe if we don't have that narrative, then we're not as totally flabbergasted by women's tears.
Well, I think that, and this has once again, this has to do with a maturity thing. It's like, what do you think those tears mean? If we put the tears mean that the person is hurting, and that they're letting go of pain, then we can be patient, and then we got to get back to the business. But if we and the important aspect of that is get back to the business. The manipulative people, they try to make the tears the end of the discussion. Somebody has been hurt, game over. And that's when, especially at younger ages, because I've raised 3 daughters and I have a wife, my wife does not use tears to be manipulative. It's like, but my daughters, when they were young, they don't do it anymore, but when they were young, they did. They cried to try to get out of trouble. If you tried to hold them accountable, which is popular these days, they would cry and hope that was enough. And their mother would step in and go like, look, she's already crying, blah, 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 and try to get it to stop. I said, yeah, but she hasn't fixed the problem. She hasn't agreed to alter the behavior. She doesn't understand the lesson yet. And I would not stop until there was an understanding, because that understanding is what brings forward maturity and the ability to alter the behavior so they don't continue to cause damage with their own behavior. What we see these days is people cry, and then they continue the behavior. They continue to cause the damage because people let them get away with an emotional response as the end of it. Can't you see that I'm hurting? It's like, well, the tears don't indicate pain. The tears could just as easily indicate sorrow. They could indicate fear. They could indicate all kinds of other things. But as adults, we're responsible for the lessons being taught, not for the emotions being indulged. And if we're going to continue to practice this behavior of making decisions based on somebody else's emotions, we're going to be set up to be tricked, to be manipulated. And then when the other person doesn't respond like we guessed that they would, we're going to feel betrayed because we have no agreement with them on a change of behavior. What we did was make assumptions, pretending like we're all empaths. And I think that feeling means this. And I'm going to project my expectations on the person without them taking responsibility for stating, like an adult, what they're willing to do. So they have no responsibility in it. And that's why you see a lot of these people who are highly emotive, they never change because they're never given or expected to take responsibility. All they're given is more attention for their emotions.
Okay, I imagine like that's how making me think of like conflict with people who are emoting, like not necessarily women, it could be men, just
there's a lot of men who've picked up on this trick.
Yeah, I think I've heard you talk about it in another podcast about men,
especially young men.
Yes,
a young man will cry to get out of trouble. I've seen him do it in jail for horrible actions, and I've seen females respond to these young men like they were little boys. They'll respond to these young men who have physically hurt people when they cry like they fell down and hurt themselves and they have a boo-boo. Oh, God, he scraped his knee. Look, he's crying. What a boo-boo. Let's put some Bactine on it or something.
Right.
And what they did was they stabbed somebody or they shot at somebody.
Right.
And they'll treat that, they'll be so enmeshed with the emotions that they'll totally lose sight of this was a horrible act of violence that somebody could have died from. And this kid is crying, and you're going to not follow through with humanizing the entire experience. You're going to dehumanize him by breaking it down into only emotions and no responsibility for the actions.
Yeah, so then humanizing it would be like the actual violence that took place. There's somebody else who's maybe not in the room, but they're stabbed now or they're wounded, and
you're going to pay their hospital bill.
Right, there you
If it takes you 10 years to work it off, you're going to pay it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what your other circumstances are. It doesn't matter if you go to college or not. You're going to pay the bill.
What I was imagining in recalling incidents where I've dealt with somebody, in maybe who's emotional is like just discomfort. Like, I imagine as a parent, like, was it as a parent where you had all those or most of those experiences? Where you where does one get trained to sort of hang in the breach and handle whatever emotional outburst? Because it might not be tears, it might be anger, right? It could be somebody breaking furniture, like you said. But like, how do you know? How do you have the maturity to, or what does it look like to develop the maturity to see a conflict and be like, okay, this is where this has to go?
So I don't know if this is in context to what you're saying. However, let's say something got damaged, a person, place, thing, whatever you want to call it, and there was some kind of reparation needed. Nothing needs to be done until the reparation is complete. So say you broke a window. It's like you don't need to punish them. You don't need to congratulate them. You don't need to do anything until, like, at one point my son broke some windows. And I was sitting there looking at him, and he was 5 or 6. And, of course, those were my windows, and they cost money, and I needed the windows so the wind didn't blow freely through the building. and I saw a whole bunch of inconveniences lined up because these windows were broken. Now, I could have taken an adult perspective and gone like, that was the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. What in the hell do you think you were doing? But I'm talking to a 5-year-old. Now, why would a 5-year-old break windows? Is he being malicious? Well, he didn't seem to have any anger, rage, frustration going on to be malicious, so I couldn't assume it's that. Do I think he's just a mean little prick and tyrannical and trying to hurt me and make my life inconvenient? I think he's way too self-centered for that. He is 5 after all. So I asked him, I said, why do you break all these windows? And he looks at me with his beautiful little eyes and his smooth little skin, and he goes, I like the way it sounded. And it's like, so how do you punish that? So in my view, punishment's not what's the reparation is. So there was nothing needed to be done except for put him in the car, go to the hardware store, get the panes of glass, get the putty to fix the panes of glass, take him down, show him how to fix, even though he's only 5, how to fix a window, sit there with him, and take him through the entire process where he takes his time in his day, and now he's taking both of our times. Neither of us have enough time to do this job. Both of us are going to do the damn job. And he fixed every pane of glass that he broke. It's like, that's reparation for what happened. And I didn't say at the end, good job. At the end, what I said was, would you please not break any more of my windows? And he said, okay, Dad. And it was over. It was a very practical, reasonable, and an effective response to what had happened. It didn't have to do with, my windows and my thing and how dumb are you and blah, blah, blah. It had to do with the windows are broken, they need to be fixed. But right now, our whole society is so hell-bent on turning everything into an emotional connection to everything that the emotional connection has nothing to do with function. And it ends with the emotional connection, so shit just stays broke, pardon my language. But it just stays broke. And so no one has to take responsibility for things moving forward. And we are going to get to that shining armor stuff, right? Boy, we took off flying on this thing. That's good.
So let's let our reader mail bring it back. So this message says, I'd ask. He asks, is there a positive place for those knight in shining armor, damsel in distress instincts that many men and women have? Do you believe it's all just childish and undermines real connection and partnership? Or do you think there is some healthy application of such instincts in a self-aware, mutually respectful way?
Okay, so here's what I would say. I like the way that he ended it. So I think it's a natural and normal position for a young, up-and-coming young man. And what I'm talking about is somebody hitting puberty. So his testosterone level is skyrocketing. His muscles are becoming firm. His self-awareness of him physically is becoming focused. How his hair looks, how his chest looks, how fast he is or not. All these things, he's becoming hyper self-conscious, which could be covered up with armor. So you can't really see him, but he can also test his abilities. He's naturally drawn to risky behavior to test his abilities. So wanting to be tested is a normal puberty thing. That's why like tryouts for baseball and football teams and things they're so nerve-wracking, but they're so important. Like trying out, and it could be for a play or something, but being something where you're tested, you're measured, and you're judged. It enlivens all of those things in them. It scares the living crap out of them. And so putting on the armor and making it look as good as he can make it look, and he's going to take all the courage he's got, because testosterone will allow you to do that, and step out there and do that. And now the most important thing is in the wake, right? A damsel. Because the most powerful force of the universe is at play. Procreation. Everything depends on him being successful to do this one thing. His whole biology, beyond his psychology, every instinct is designed to enable him to do this one thing. I know this great psychologists agree, but he's here to do that. He is here to, and she gets to choose, and he wants to be chosen. So the risk is high. Keep exposure at the minimum. Armor yourself, because this is scary. It's going to get seen. And go out and do. Well, how do you find her? Well, do you think she's willfully going to step out there and go, hey, I'm judging the crap out of you right now, and I'm deciding whether you're going to measure up or not, because I have a job to do? Because there is a time where, in a tribal way, the consideration of the female was the gene pool. It wasn't the importance of a whole bunch of other stuff. It wasn't how is she going to be affected. Procreation was about, is this the strongest gene pool that I'm going to participate in, so my offspring, the woman's going to bear children, have the greatest chance of survival, because not everybody lives. Those are the considerations on why they choose. Not just, I'm going to go have sex with anybody. I'm going to go have sex with the best. And he's working his ass off to try to, if he's not the best, at least be as close to the best that's available to her. And it's like, so now he's got the armor on. If he's smart, it's shiny, it's sharp, it looks like it's effective armor. And she's considering what he's doing. In order for him to perform, she has got to give him something to perform about. She's got to give him some distress to serve. So that he has a reason to perform. Not just he comes in there like a clumsy old oaf in a bunch of armor. She has to have a reason for him to expose himself, because that's what she's asking him to do. You see it in nightclubs, and in the worst case scenarios, you hear about it all the time, where these young gals will work a situation where two young males will start fighting over her. It's like, that's old. That's not new news, and they have all kinds of names for it now. But what she could possibly be doing is looking for the best mate possible. If you don't demonize her, and these guys are trying to prove themselves as the best mate possible. It's like, okay, if you get down to the nitty-gritty, who's going to expose themselves? Somebody wins, somebody loses. They're supposed to, what we've done in time is we created rules of engagement so that we don't have a bunch of dudes going around killing each other all the time. It happens too often, but they're still doing the same shit they've always done. So when does it become appropriate? Is it appropriate then? Well, from behind a suit of armor, many young men just want to be chosen. They don't really care who chooses them, especially female. They will settle for being chosen. Why it's important that that young man or man can change his armor, get the shield down, pull the mask up, and see what he's looking at, because he has some responsibilities in mating too. He's got some responsibilities in that relationship.
after he's chosen, beyond being chosen.
Before he's got to allow himself to be chosen and make sure that who he's getting chosen by is going to be competent and capable of the things that he needs in his life. What he needs is someone who can take care of his offspring when he's out busy, let's say, farming or hunting. You know, these guys go out hunting. They're going hunting that for weeks and months at a time. No knight in shining armor can get back to the ranch or the castle soon enough so this person who was once the damsel in distress, now she better kick some ass. And he needs to know that she can kick some ass. So he now needs to take the armor off and go do the other things that life is going to expect from him. He needs to know that who he's involved with is a fully competent and capable, mature woman who doesn't get herself in trouble, who doesn't get things to make herself in distress, who takes care of her own problems, who doesn't come to him with simple situations because she doesn't feel like doing things, who doesn't dump the difficult things in life on him while he's going out doing the difficult things in life also. They need to form a partnership. So he needs to get the armor off so he can see her clearly. And while he's doing that, she gets to see him more clearly. And of whether or not she wants to make the choice that she's getting ready to make. And so as he removes the armor, she gets to know him better. He gets to know her better, and they decide how far they want to go with this thing. One of the problems that in the metaphor of all of it is people are making these decisions way too hastily, way too quick. By the time he gets the armor off, and it's nice because a lot of women are encouraging men to take the armor off, and the men are taking the armor off, but they're taking the armor off without knowing the woman, because you can't take the armor off if you don't know that she can take care of herself.
In what way, or by what do you mean that women are encouraging men to take the armor off? Because if we're in the nightclub, you know, where the men are like being the knights in shining armor, that's where it's not happening, I suppose, right? That's where
if you're a man or a young man and you take the armor off in a nightclub, you have been poorly mentored. You have not had the right kind of older men around you to tell you, no, you leave that shit on. You leave that shit on all night. You do not take it off. And while you have that on, you better be watching her. Watch her. Because you may not want to take it off by the end of the night. Sex may not be worth exposing yourself. Because that's the decision you have to make. It's like, it may not be worth it. Now, I know some younger men, they think that sex is the goal. It's like, well, sex is fun. Sex is entertaining. Sex should be enjoyed. Mm-hmm. It should be like enlivening and invigorating, and you know, if you get to know each other a little better, that's cool too. If you don't, that's cool too. But it's not the end of it all, and it's puts you in a very vulnerable state. Who are you being vulnerable with? Do you know them well enough to expose yourself? If you don't, and you expose yourself, you're gonna have to deal with that kind of vulnerability. It's like, okay, I know most of the time when they use the word vulnerability, what most people say, and these are the sickest people, is they say they really want to see you cry. If somebody's telling you to be vulnerable because they want to see you cry, don't talk to them ever again. Because it's a very sick thing to ask. It's not a healthy thing. And they'll come up with things like, you know, vulnerability is really strength. And they'll make it sound like something. Vulnerability is something that happens. Crying is something that happens after you've been injured. These people who want to see you cry, they think the crying is the vulnerability. But what they've ignored is that you came to them injured, and they want you to expose your injuries.
See, I guess I haven't known those kinds of people intimately, but I can sort of imagine it. I can imagine them because like I know those types of movies that are like, where there's a part where it's like, oh, it maybe makes you want to cry or whatever. I should notice I try to avoid saying that it made me cry, like it didn't make me cry. But
you get old enough, all kinds of stuff makes you cry because you have like a big long past and you've been injured a lot, and so a lot of things percolate to the surface like really in opportune times.
Well, like, but I guess those things that make you cry, but they're like you think it's good if good art ever makes you cry or something like that, right? Where it's something very human, like, and then I can imagine like walking away from that and saying, oh, that's a good movie, and then I'm gonna make those moments happen more often, or maybe that's like that could be like a pathological result of seeing a moment like that, is that what you're sort of saying, that the people that you should get away from, the people that want to see you cry?
Yeah, that are sitting here, you're having a regular dialogue, maybe you're friendly, maybe you're getting to know each other, and maybe it's too soon, or maybe it's just a part of a discussion. If my interest is in seeing you cry, I'm a little perverted.
Yeah.
For me, it would be like that Sarah McLachlan Arms of the Angel, because I've known a whole bunch of dead drug addicts, which is songs about her brother who dies in a hotel room and blah, blah, blah. And so since I have that background of knowing actual dead people, that song comes on and the sweetness of her voice just resonates inside my body and all the sorrow that goes along with that.
Okay.
And so, but people who, if you're having a conversation and I don't know you very well, and all of a sudden I'm trying to get you to perform for me, it's like, do you really want to know all of my pain? Well, I was speaking with the congressman from San Luis Obispo County's partner, and she was going into this whole vulnerability thing, and I said, well, do you ever ask him how angry he is? You want him to express his emotions. Do you ever say, like, hey, what is it about being the congressman of the county that really pisses you off? Like what do people do when you're trying to get bills passed and stuff that you just want to kill them? Do you ever ask him to express the rage that he feels when somebody undermines his authority and keeps him from making things better for his constituency? She goes, oh, no, I don't want to see how angry he is. It's like, that person you shouldn't have emotional conversations with that person.
With her, that this woman that wants to see him cry but not
she
wants to see him angry.
Because she wants to see him cry. She only wants to see one feeling.
Yeah.
She doesn't want him to see. She doesn't want to know what's going on with him. She wants to see him perform this one act. What she's not interested in is the amount of pain he goes through day in and day out, dealing with all of the things he has to deal with in a man in his position, and what that actually takes to go to work every day with people who are arguing against him for things that are reasonable to benefit the county that he represents. And how frustrating that is because they have another agenda to build a freeway or whatever their agenda would be. Mm-hmm. She don't want to see all those feelings. She just wants to see him cry. And what I'm saying is that's a very perverted way to relate to somebody.
It's selfish, right?
And they think that it's for his own good, and it's not. It's your voyeurism that you're satisfying.
Yeah. Selfish, yeah.
You just want to see something. It's like, and the sad part about it is, how many days a week does that person come home and get ignored because those feelings aren't being noticed the way that he expresses them every day?
Right. But that's a time where it's good to have the shining armor if people are trying to get you, they want to see you cry.
Leave it on.
Okay. So where is it happening that so that's one instance of where the women want where people are asking for the armor to come off, but the armor should come off, you're saying.
I am saying that.
So where is that?
So say I get to know somebody that I'm dating. I get to know them pretty well. They are self-contained. They have their own feelings about things. They don't set me up for conversations that turn into arguments over issues. You know, if they ask my opinion about something, it doesn't turn into a discussion that they're arguing over. They don't try to find ways to make my opinions correct or incorrect. They don't set me up for fights and arguments and things like that. That person is mentally safe. So what do you think? It'd be fun. I'm saying this for fun, so nobody react. You know, what do you think about Donald Trump? So let's say I love Donald Trump. I think he's a great guy. He's a great businessman. He makes great business decisions. I come up with this whole list of honoring and respecting and validating the life and existence of Donald Trump. And if they turn that into how dumb I am and how stupid I am, and they want to get into a slaughtering Donald Trump's character, they're revealing something about themselves. And I need to pay attention. And the armor needs to stay on. Because it's guaranteed that they're going to treat me that way. That as soon as I don't meet their approval, I'm going to get wiped out. Just like they did when they didn't like Donald Trump. As soon as I do something they don't like, doesn't meet their approval, I have a difference of opinion, they're going to do it to me. Leave the armor on. If they go, wow, you know, let me give that some more thought. I never really thought of any attributes Donald Trump might have. You seem to have named a few. Let's go look at some evidence and see if anything you said was true. and they go and they do their own homework and they find something out. If they answer like that, I go like, okay, man, I'm going to take one of these metal gloves off. You don't take it all off at one time. Uh-huh. Okay, I can take the helmet off now. Uh-huh. It's like, and then take a little bit off. Make yourself a little more vulnerable. And while you're doing that, what you want to find out is, if you want to have a mature relationship, while you're making yourself vulnerable, are they setting themselves up to protect you? Because it's a reasonable request for a man to ask for a woman's protection if he is going to become vulnerable. If you're dealing with an adult woman, honey, I got to go to the hospital. While I'm at the hospital, these things still need to get done.
Yeah.
Can you do them? Or will you do them? They're my responsibility, I know. But I need you to take care of my responsibilities because I'm going to be vulnerable and not available. And she's one of those kind of women who will say, of course I will. Because we're partners. And when you can't do it, the normal things you do, I'll take on the responsibilities and I'll take care of them. Just like you would for me if I wasn't available. It's like, oh, this person could be a partner I could be a partner with. Well, when you get to the point where they could be a partner, you can take the armor off.
So that's actually a pretty, so the knight in shining armor is actually not looking that bad because you need the armor at the beginning, and then you just need to vet the princess or whatnot.
Yes.
The damsel, so to speak. And then you can take the armor off. So maybe the damsel in distress part is the more and even the damsel in distress part, we say that has its function because the woman is creating something for the man to expose himself with or prove himself with. But maybe that part is less. Less
hopefully,
important.
what's going on is there's got to be a female counterpart here. Well, she's learning from what's going on, too. This is not two people who are growing in a void. They're a partner. They're becoming partners. They're making agreements. They're discussing things. And they're coming to conclusions about how this thing's going to operate, how we're going to function together. I'm better at this. I'll do that. You're better at that. You do that. We'll just figure it out. You're better at this, but you don't have time, so I'll do it, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like my father used to say, one of my father's phrases was this. He'd go like, well, what kind of man would worry about that? because in the late 60s, early 70s, there was the whatever was going on at the time, and a lot of men were coming. Things were being said like, what kind of man would do the dishes and things like that. The stereotypical things that became stereotypical later. Archie Bunker was happening, and my father would say, well, what kind of man would worry about that? And what kind of man would worry about who does the dishes?
Yeah.
It's not a very good measurement of it. And he helped make things clear, like, some things aren't the measure of the man, but when we're younger men, when we're less mature men, we don't have good mentors. We use unrealistic measurements for what being a man is. And that's why you got to be careful, and having good mentors is important, because a good mentor will tell you, like, take the armor off incrementally, not let you go, oh, it's time for sex, I think I'll rip all the armor off. It's like, which may end up being a very insidious way to get yourself killed.
I'm reading the definition for damsel. A young, unmarried woman, formerly especially applied to one of gentle birth, maid. A shoe-shaking projection on a... Okay, I think it's that first. First definition we're looking at. Yeah.
So so in the class system of the times, where there was young women who were of gentle birth, they were probably associated with a castle. Probably a castle that the knight in shining armor was closely associated with also. But in the Man to Men weekend, one of the things I like to talk about is once these damsels become responsible, they move up to another level. And if they're not entirely, just for the sake of the discussion, let's say she then becomes a queen. It's like, well, it's a big fat mistake for you to stay a knight if she becomes a queen. And if a man does not mature in the mind about what his position is, and he remains a knight, he lives a life of servitude to the woman, which will end up either depressed. He'll be depressed all the time. He will not be invigorated in his attitude and outlook on things. He will just do things from a listless point of duty. But he won't have any real passion for it. But if he assumes the next level of becoming a king, it's an amazing thing, because you know what that queen will do? If he takes that armor off, when it comes time to put the armor back on, she'll help him. And if he goes down in battle and he's injured and he can't run the kingdom, she will run it. She won't go replace him with another king. She won't go find another replacement. She has a sense of being a partner with him, and in his absence or in his illness or whatever, she has a duty and a responsibility to be strong, to be steadfast, to be unwavering in the partnership that makes them a kingdom. And I know some asshole's going to say, what about a queendom? But you know what I mean. Because the immature people are the ones who say things like, what about a queendom? We're talking about metaphor and myth here.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to grow the hell up and get out of that stuff too, in this new style of declaration from Disney. Because that's the other comedy of all of that. It's like, this shit's coming out of Walt Disney World. Okay, can we say Disney and what that is?
What is
the happiest place on earth for children? It's for children.
Yeah.
The entire makeup of the entire thing is for children. Now let's talk about how, if you want to get serious adult about that. So why are they using their media to exploit their access to children? Let's talk about what kind of people that makes them. I love Disney. I love everything about Disney. I go to Disneyland, all that.
I,
But if we're going to let Disney get into politics, it's like, what about the children? What about the children? Because that's who Walt Disney cared about, and they're destroying a legacy that was super important for a really long time.
I mean, that's a little bit more about that Snow White thing, right? Because the idea with that is that Disney lately has been remaking movies according to this more modern, right, sensibility. And I don't know, I'm almost like I'm wincing at like, am I or are we going overboard or in the politic, a hot topic? But I don't know. I guess we could go into that hot topic. But I guess more importantly, does it relate to is it serving our damsel in distress, knight in shining armor discussion? Are we?
Well, and I think is it serving what we're trying to get it to serve? Do we have the studies available to show that if we make a cartoon into a multicolored cartoon that it's out of culture? I mean, I could see like if I got something and it's a whole cultural cartoon that a whole culture is validated, I could see how that would be enlivening, enriching, and could make a person feel like their culture has value and belongs in the structure, the social structure.
Mm-hmm.
But to take one character and shade it with color and to tell ourselves as adults to over dramatize the impact that's going to have, I think is a maturity issue. I think that there's an immaturity behind that it's not going to produce what we're saying it's going to produce. Because first of all, how many people are going to see it? How many people are going to see it? If I'm a little kid if you don't sit there and tell me, hey, did you see that happened? That thing was this color instead of that color? And that means that you're included. You're basically telling them that they're not included until that happened. Mm-hmm. So until they make the color of the cartoons right, you're telling this kid that he was never included. And they take it that way. Mm-hmm. And they may not have ever known that. I did not know that I lived in a mixed neighborhood until I was like in 7th grade. I didn't know that like the kids next door were different until somebody told me they were different.
Yeah.
It's like, oh wow. And I didn't know that like the mom and dad were a mixed marriage until the end of the 60s. It's like I didn't know. I lived in East San Diego. And it's like she was Mexican, he was black, and it was okay to say Mexican and black at the time. But I didn't know, like, why does he have an afro and he's got wavy hair? And they're brothers. And nobody was going around going, hey, nobody addressed it. But I was the little redhead kid next to him. It's all in the pictures. It's all sitting there. We didn't know until the adults taught it. The adults taught the difference to the kids. And then we started to learn. We taught these kids how to be mad.
How to be offended.
Now it's offended.
Yeah, what did I thought I actually was thinking about. I thought about something. I think I heard you say it at a Man-to-Men weekend. Because I got into an online some debate about the Middle East or something, and somebody came on and was they were a little. I was joking. They were kind of Trumpy with me, like, because they weren't civil. They were just like, oh, you're fucking, you're a child. Your point of view is stupid, and I definitely played with being offended. And then I remembered, I think you said something about like how, well, if you are offended, you are just giving your power away. And it was like, oh yeah, like I don't need to be like, there's no, I don't get, it's not mature to be offended.
It is actually a willful act of submission.
Okay, yeah.
Is how I put it. I don't believe that anybody has the power to give their power away, but you were willfully submitting, and there's a very interesting manipulation in doing it. It's very manipulative to submit, especially in a verbal argument. It's a strategy in a physical argument, so that you don't get killed. But in a verbal discussion, because right now, it is an act of dominance to submit. Because to be offended accesses you to a different authority. If he who cries offended first wins, it's a very feminine quality.
Yeah.
To be offended, it's not necessarily. In a masculine sense, to surrender is an intelligent decision at times, based on self-preservation. But to be offended emotionally, you first have to make up the right emotions. And be clear, all of the emotions are made up.
I think that I can see that, but it might be good for you to talk me through it. Even like I can know that I felt some emotions when I was getting offended, and then
as we do,
as I was like, and it was a little bit like slamming a door, like it's all online, so there's no door to slam, so to speak, but it's a click, block or whatever. It's
click cancel,
and it's there's something going on there, and then I realized it and tried to circle back a little, but it was kind of like, oh yeah, that was
okay, so let's pretend that the brain is attached to a nervous system.
Okay.
And that the nervous system is attached to every part of the body. Ears, tongue, eyes, and everywhere else.
Yeah.
Whatever other ones. So, and to emote is a result of receiving information through the nervous system, because emotion is a decision, it's a judgment.
Yeah.
So something happens. Johnny the knob says something, and all of a sudden I say something back based on responding to Johnny the knob. And then he says something back. I make a judgment about what he said. I can either make it personal to myself, or I can see it as he's revealing something about himself. If Johnny the knob is just being a knob, then he looks like a jerk. If I make it personal about me, which is not necessarily the best thing to do, but it went into my ears, and my ears are attached to my brain, and so my brain is moving information around into all of the different places that information moves around. I'm making judgments about that information, deciphering it into meaning of some kind, and then I decide what will my emotional response be. I could be offended, which means that I have been attacked. Something has come from the outside in.
I remember feeling a lot of fear before I got, as I was leading. I mean, I know fear had a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm. And so, and that might be the tone of voice that he used when he said what he said. It may not be the actual words that he said. It might have been in the tone, because we could be manipulated with voice tone. It's not what you said, it's how you said it. Yeah, well, when you say something and it sounds really loud and aggressive, I think that I'm in danger. And if I think I'm in danger, I'm going to get afraid. And after I get afraid, if I think I'm scared enough, I'm going to get ready to fight, flight, or freeze. Right? That's the basic psychology of it.
Uh-huh.
Well, whichever one you chose, if you didn't freeze, so now you're in fight or flight. A lot of people forget the freeze part. But, so now am I going to fight this guy? Sometimes it's in the more civil days, sometimes it sounds like an argument. So now you're going back and forth. La, 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 la. Somebody's trying to win. We're competing now. We're in a fight. And then at a point of, I'm going to surrender, but I don't want to lose. The way you get out of not losing or admitting your loss is to be offended. Well, now I've been offended. I've been arguing, and now we're the last moment of where I should be either accepting defeat, accepting loss, or because it's not so serious that I'm in danger, so I'm not going to run away. It's like, oh, I'll just cry offended, and offended actually pulls a win out of the loss, because in the state we're in right now as a culture, being offended is an advantage.
Yeah.
Because it takes you out of responsibility for every time you were responding like a prick to that guy before you got offended.
That's right.
You probably weren't at your very best behavior leading up to being offended. Might have said some things that didn't shine the greatest light on your genius and intellect. And then when it got bad enough, you're just like, oh, you were in too far, and everybody saw you.
That was the fear was all around, my need or wanting to look good. Like my whole online presence is this whole like look or whatever, and it was like, oh, I don't feel sophisticated anymore.
Yeah.
So
it's like, oh, and then you get offended, and it's like, does that mean that they were being offensive? Well, if you're on a phone or online, you physically cannot be offended.
right.
Like if you got the dictionary, and you look at offended, you physically can't get offended with words on a telephone. You can egotistically get offended.
Right. That sounds more like
It's like, oh, you hurt my feelings. It's like, oh, because what you said, I'm feeling like this about myself. So in my self-centeredness, I don't feel good about myself because what you're saying right now doesn't promote that in me. Like, oh, crap. And now we have raised an entire culture in the last 10 years of you can manage people with words. They have it measurable. Facebook or any of those platforms, they can send out things and they can guess within percentages about elections just by saying something bad about or good about somebody. And it's like, and they have like statistics to measure it with. It's like, oh, and they want to control it because I'll bite and I'll involve myself with it, and I'll say Trump is this and Trump is that. And the crappy thing about it is I have no way to know if it's true.
mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't watch the news much unless somebody guides me directly to something, but I don't even know if I know all the letters. I know I've Fox News and MSNBC, or somebody's the good guy and somebody's the bad guy and stuff or whatever. And it's like, and these guys come up and they say who the horrible people are and who the not horrible people are. And they're gathering their information from the media, and they're formulating these opinions, and they're getting in passionate arguments and saying crappy things about people that they've never met, but they heard it on one of these stations that has a vested interest in you saying crappy things about somebody because they're trying to sway the attention of I want you to love Putin this week and the other guy the next week and whoever you're supposed to like or dislike, to manage their own investments. And it works.
Now this feels like this is trying to think very big. Like I kind of think about with man to men, or what, like a lot of times we try to think like about what we can manage, like I can manage myself. It's like the Jordan Peterson, make your bed and then you can go. Maybe then we'll take your opinion seriously about the whole greater world.
Right.
I notice myself, like, as I try to. So like the knight in shining armor is useful conduct for you as you walk out into the world and have a relationship. But when we start getting, I admit, like, my brain gets overwhelmed a little when I try to think of the implications for the wider society. Does yours too? I mean, what's...
Well, it's how am I going to use the information? Because right now we are so, and I think this is super important, because I do it on my own podcast. You can go to the Man to Men, and I'm putting things out on Instagram now. Because my main drive right now through meditation is think for yourself. Memes are so popular right now, and passing on. You send a meme on your podcast, and then all of a sudden I send the meme on, and somewhere down the meme road, people are arguing or saying, "Oh, this is so great what you sent," and they'll give the person credit for a meme that is the 12,000th time it got sent, rather than, okay, it gave you an idea. The meme gave you an idea. Good. Did you come up with any more ideas from it? Because the only thing that makes you human is your ability to create. And so if you don't take these good ideas or bad ideas and take responsibility for having the idea, whatever condition you have it in, and take responsibility for what you turn it into, you're a puppet. You're just a puppet. So even like we're doing what we're doing right now, and I'm never doing anything so somebody can say Mitch said. It's like, take it, and however you use it, take responsibility for how you use it.
Yeah.
But it's like, there's a couple of, it's like gun control.
Yeah.
It's like they want to blame the gun, not let the person be responsible for how they use it. Or 12-step people, they want to blame the drug, and they actually personify drugs and alcohol. It's cunning, baffling, and powerful. It is none of those things. It doesn't have those characteristics, qualities, or abilities. But they've sold an organization has sold a product that has helped millions by creating an idea that says this is cunning, baffling, and powerful, and it has no ability on its own. It's not until that person takes responsibility that they're able to change.
Yeah, what is cunning, baffling, and powerful is like you when you have decided you're going to take a drink or something like. I mean,
yeah.
I guess, yeah.
And what's insane is I know this is going to hurt me, and you do it anyway.
Yeah,
and that's very adolescent.
Yeah,
it's when you first put on the armor. I'm going to put on this armor. I'm going to go put myself at risk. That's dumb. That's dumb. For a species that is geared around survival, it's dumb to sit there and go, I'm going to go put on this armor and go. But we do it. I mean, that's how we make armies. It's like, hey, go put on this armor. Go put yourself at risk. They go like, F yeah. And they generate this kind of egotism because they're predisposed to it, because they're trying to grow.
You harness it, yeah.
They're trying to take responsibility for themselves. They're trying to become more than in some sort of way. And what we're talking about in this podcast is, and then what? Because in order to socialize, you've got to be able to do what you got to do in the armor, which is good. Skills you should have, but you got to also be able to take that armor off and the way that things are going now, I really want to support women to be partners with men by pointing out the qualities and characteristics of women, adult, mature women, that have nothing to do with being damsels, that have nothing to do with indulging in the things that distress them, and have everything to do with being partners to someone who is willing to put their life on the line for them. If I'm going to put my life on the line for you, I want you to stand next to me. And so I'm trying to get to this place of there's the TV series Vikings of Ragnar and Agatha.
Okay.
Ragnar gets sick. He gets hurt. Agatha's sitting there with her shield and her sword and a spear. Full responsibility for his well-being, the responsibility of the village, the responsibility of, she includes her partner in what she is taking responsibility to protect. Not, fuck it, he's useless to me now.
Yeah.
That's what commitment of marriage is the woman includes the man in her realm, her scope of responsibility. Not, she doesn't serve him because she's submissive to him. She serves him because he's a partner, just like he serves her because they're partners. Because everyone knows, whether you like to agree with it or not, that men die younger. We get injured more often than women do in all aspects of life.
Yeah.
And all the stats say it, all the stats prove it. We take the nastiest jobs. We're climbing in the sewers. We're climbing up on the freaking towers. We're building the society that gave them the freedom. And then we're getting slammed for the freedom that we gave them. Because, and what's cool right now is you're getting to hear this statement a lot. Privilege doesn't recognize itself. And so the people who have benefited from the privilege that has been provided for them by the men who have built this culture, they don't recognize it because it was given to them. They stepped into it, and they're still going way too far back in the past to justify taking what was built for them. It's like, with no appreciation.
Here's the definition of
so keep your
offend.
armor on around her.
Around the all right, I'm just, well, here, you want
How can I help?
Yes, sir.
Taking the armor off. That's where we meant to be before we got so interestingly sidetracked.
Verklempt.
Reclaimed. My goodness, now I got to get a dictionary again. So, appropriate to take the armor off, and it really is an indication of the partnership that you're forming with, just for the sake of the metaphor, the myth, the damsel in distress is now becoming a responsible adult. She takes care of her own problems. She does not live her life in a way that continually puts her in a state of distress. She handles her own business, so to speak. And as the knight sees this, appreciates her newfound freedom that she created for herself by the responsible adult behavior, he starts shedding the armor. And he starts noticing that the freedom that he's experiencing being with this woman and all the things that she is capable of and competent of and has the desire to do so that they can be together. And she wants to get to know more about him, so she makes gestures that make it apparent that it makes good sense for him to remove his armor. She makes it safe mentally, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually for him to remove the armor. It's a sensible thing to do. She minimizes the risk because of how she treats him, how she behaves towards him. And even to the point where metaphorically, as he removes pieces of the armor, she takes care of the armor. She doesn't just let him cast it aside. She knows that that armor has a place in their life together, in the partnership. It's not something that comes between them. It's a tool necessary for their partnership. It's important that he has the armor. It's just not appreciated to be on all the time. And so maybe she polishes it up and has a little place in the corner for it to be. And as he removes more and more of the armor and she gets to know him more and more and he gets to know her more and more, he's capable of asking her to take the responsibilities of that she is skilled at and capable of participating like an adult in the risk-taking, the protecting of the children, the fixing, repairing things around the house, all of the things that a man can do, a woman can do. And they're doing it as in a partnership, not as a role assigned from some cultural ideas so that the partners don't have to talk. You do this and you do that. Men do this, women do that. They're forming a partnership. But the armor is still present. It just doesn't have to be on all the time. And it's not an enemy to the relationship. It's a tool for the partnership.
So these are kind of like things that a man should be looking for in a partner, and maybe that a woman should be aspiring to be in a partner. Kind of, you're talking a little bit about those things.
They're responsibilities. If a man wants to provide more intimacy in the relationship, he is going to have to take more pieces of the armor off. And if she wants that to make sense, she's going to have to take care of the armor.
Mm-hmm.
And because it has to be available, he still needs to be a warrior when it's time for warrioring. Some days it's killing time. And they understand that as partners, it's an average communication. It's not a egoic communication. It's not like you're the warrior and you're the It's like, we need to have this around. We need to have bows and arrows or rifles or pistols or whatever, because sometimes it's that time. And she knows it, he knows it. Same is true as if he gets sick. She knows that she's going to be expected to do some of the warrioring because of his condition willfully as partners, and it's a conversation they can have. She will have been trained in the art of it because that's what adults would have done. It's not like in the pristine little world of whatever they're showing on TV next, Native Americans or whatever, the women don't fight. They fight and they're fierce. And women today need to be that way. They want to be recognized as that way. So they should be skilled in the art of war. And as partners, they become a very formidable force. And all they have to trust is that around her, I don't have a reason to put this armor on. That the way that we treat each other as partners, there's never a reason for me to put this armor on to defend myself against her. And that should show up in character. And if you're not there yet, then you're not there yet. That's what you work towards. And that comes in from mental, emotional discipline. I'm not going to accidentally cut you with my knife. It's like, that knife might be your tongue. I'm not going to accidentally say stupid shit to hurt your feelings. I wouldn't say anything to hurt your feelings because I love you. It's not fair fighting. It's not something we accept as tolerable because it just happens. It's like, no, there's limits to it. We're adults, and we don't allow that. There are people who actually can live this way. We just lost the expectation because the knights who keep their armor on and the damsels who still are in distress are the ones making the rules. And so we've promoted through Dr. Phil and Oprah a bunch of dysfunctional relationship behavior that is totally unnecessary, and actually provided as a reasonable expectation between adults. And now we have people who are getting their emotional feelings hurt. They're getting offended. They're getting all these things because they're still thinking and acting like children, even over things that are obviously ridiculous. Obviously ridiculous. And they're still acting hurt, pretending that they're hurt, which is manipulative. And in that arena of manipulation, it proves that that person is not trustworthy. Keep the armor on. Keep the armor on, because it's total manipulation. It's an attempt of leverage in whatever war they're trying to fight. It's an attempt at leverage, because they want something and they want you to provide for it. And if probably in a they think they deserve it or they're owed it, and they're afraid that it's against your will, and so they wanted to make demands for it, or create a political arena that says that they should get it for nothing.
It is, I guess I'm trying to. What does it look like when you hear people who have? Because we talk about the knight in shining armor as like, you know, in the nightclub as they're kind of extreme examples. But like, what's like a more down to earth example when you see people who have been, you know, affected by that and are living that, you know, trying to live with the armor or trying to live as a damsel? Like, how has that shown up, and how have you seen it?
Well,
or did you try it yourself? Or do you?
I think that they still have they have a lot of self-talk. They have a lot of promotion of self-affirmations. They still have expectations of deserving, self-worth, and they're still thinking in terms of those things, and simultaneously not realizing that entire mode of thinking is also why they're not fully getting the things done in their life to have the kind of life that they want. You can't really sit around thinking about yourself all the time and do your job.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, they're being involved in groups and organizations and stuff that is promoting a high level of self-talk, or they're involved with, you know, since it's near and dear to my heart, chemical dependency stuff, and they get stuck in this self-evaluation mode all the time, and they got a reason why for everything that has to do with some type of dysfunction, and, you know, they don't show up to work every day. As though the fact that, you know, my grandmother slapped me has something to do with why I didn't, you know, take the garbage out. So that's how those would be the indications as to whether or not that other person is ready for it, or that they think that they're supposed to work these things out in a relationship. Like they can't work it out until they get into a relationship, and now we're going to work out my self-esteem issues by me demanding that you treat me a certain way. Well, if I'm demanding you treat me a certain way, I'm already out of control. Yeah. Way out of control of myself.
Yeah.
Because if I think it's up to me to tell you how to treat me, and I'm not leaving you because of how you treat me in the first place, I'm already operating fully in the dysfunction of that I'm trying to get you to fix for me. It's like, I shouldn't have to tell you how to treat me or I'll leave you. That shouldn't be the discussion. There shouldn't be a discussion. It should be like, oh, you treat people like shit. I'm not coming back. Not an elongated discussion of trying to work out a relationship issue when you've only been dating for a week or two and pretending like we're going to last forever. It's like, you're supposed to date to get to know the person. And if they don't qualify, they don't qualify. If their character is not what you want to be around, or they show signs of being negative, being unavailable, or whatever it is, whatever name you want to put on it. And if you don't want to be around it, you don't go out on another date.
Yeah, right. Okay.
It's we've turned it into this. Every time a man and a woman goes out, it's supposed to be so that you can get married and have children. And instead of so that you can get to know the other person, see what kind of person they are, and see if you want to go out a second time.
Yeah.
Or a third time or a fourth time. And, it's like, give it like, in a really good relationship, give it like 10 dates. Don't have sex till 25 dates. Because once you start having sex, it's like you're not thinking clearly.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not thinking clearly.
Yeah.
It's just everything gets crazy and stupid. But who wants to wait 25 dates? That's like out of the question.
Yeah.
I just made up the 25 dates just so that anybody listening. I just made up randomly 25 dates. It's not a formula. It's not magic or anything. It's not the number. It's like, but just understand that, if you're there to have sex, though, be there to have sex. Give it your best. Have a good time. Enjoy yourself. But don't put a bunch of other expectations on it besides that.
Yeah.
And you definitely don't expect that you're going to get smarter once you have sex. Because sex doesn't fix anything. It doesn't make anything better. It's just fun. It's like people get all crazy when it comes to sex. They just imagine weird things and they think that sex will make it into something else. It's like, well, hopefully it'll make it fun.
Well, as you said, it's the biological imperative,
Yeah. Yeah, you should want to.
Well, I guess, going okay. So we've got a lot of knights in shining armor who could use some more seasoning, and so we're talking about how they can be more mature, and also, but we've also got a lot of damsels, and they're also looking for ways to be more mature. I don't know if this would help or add to the discussion, but like when you and your wife met, how many of these was that? Did you go through something like what you just said? Were you ready, or did you luck out? Were you not ready, but you just sort of,
Well, we had the benefit of living 50 miles apart. So some of it's luck, some of it's laziness. I think that's part of what the distance helped. So that when we were together, we actually had to try. So it wasn't like, when you live really close, sometimes you just fabricate this idea of obligation for being together. My wife is a very productive businesswoman who is very creative and very adept at making plans, following through. She stays busy. She has her own interests, and they're not negotiable interests. They're not subject to approval or disapproval. They're not part of a conversation in the relationship. They're not part of the partnership. Her interests are not part of our partnership. I'm the same way. I have interests that I have. They're not part of our partnership. They're not like, how is this and what about that and blah, 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 blah. Did you blah, blah, blah. There's something she does I have no interest in. And I don't pretend that I'm interested. I don't make it's one of the things we say, like she gets on a computer and she can do things with a computer that I can't do. And if she tries to talk me through it, I get all ADD on her. I start distracting and pushing buttons and making comments and noises and things that somebody who's not interested in would do. And that's the same thing if I had this conversation going on very long with my wife, she would probably have a computer turned on, looking at her cell phone and talking and texting somebody, have a few different devices going on because she's not interested in this stuff. She's interested. She loves that I do it. She would tell people that I'm good at what I do. She would even listen to the podcast when we were done. But to sit here and do what we're doing right now, not interested. And we're honest about that.
Yeah.
We don't sit there and pretend that we're interested in everything the other person is doing and have discussions over whether or not we should or shouldn't be. It's like, I'm not. I'm not.
Uh-huh.
And she's the same way. She's like, I'm not. Philosophy? No, I'm not interested in it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like though that there was some circumstance involved, but yeah, you pretty much were able to play by the recommended rules. Because I find that even like you and I are in we have some tricks we know from the Sterling Men's Weekend, and yet seems like most men won't avail themselves of them. They'll go the other route. Maybe it's the knight in shining armor. Maybe it's something else. Lack of maturity, I guess.
Lack of maturity. Well,
yeah.
I think one of the biggest mistakes that gets made in that, even in that arena, is that the men will not expose to their women things that are important to them. They're still so immature that they're more concerned over whether or not she approves or disapproves than conveying to her that this subject, whatever it is important to me. It's like they don't take the time to make sure that she understands that what I am talking to you about right now is important to me. It matters to me. And so I want you to listen. You can give me any kind of feedback you want, but the feedback I get from you, I want you to understand you are talking about something that is important to me. I don't want your opinion about whether or not it should or shouldn't be. If you want to help me, I'm willing to listen to what kind of help you can give me. But it's not a discussion about whether or not this should be important to me. I'm just telling you. And men who are learning about taking the armor off, very few get to the point where they take enough of that armor off to admit to their women that there's shit they do in their lives, things they do in their lives that are important to them. And if they don't do them, they will suffer from all kinds of mental and physical illnesses. They'll suffer from depressions. They'll suffer from anxieties. And they will over-focus on things that are not important to them. And it gets really detrimental because if a man is not following those things that he's passionate about, he will want compensation. He will want, if I'm not going to get to do what and I don't care if it's go to the bar on Sunday to watch the game or whatever, if he is not doing something that he is passionate about, he wants to be compensated for that.
Yeah.
He's giving up something important to him.
Yeah. Yeah, that resonates. Yeah.
Yeah, and if people haven't reached the level of maturity where they can express that and accept that about each other, they're not very far down the road in that relationship, no matter what. They definitely have not reached the place where they should be talking very seriously about being married. It's like that's a okay, if you can make this line, we can get married. Because if either person has to give up something that is that important to them, marriage should be out of the question. The goal isn't the marriage. The goal is that the marriage enhances the lives of the people in it.
Huh, yeah.
It's the marriage is created by the attitude, outlook, and behavior of the people in the marriage, not the marriage makes them into something. They make the marriage.
It's weird. I mean, I think what I was realizing in that moment, I mean, I believe that I had some notion of marriage just from like being a little kid, like, oh, people just they grow up, they get married, and they don't like most people don't put much thought into it because that's me being arrogant, looking down at most people, like, oh, they're most people are dumb or that presumption is underneath. So then I'm like imagining most people going on without having sort of a thin or superficial type of relationship. And kind of what you're saying is that, well, pretty much marriage requires, like, if you're not mature, you maybe shouldn't get married, right? Like,
not maybe.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Because and we're seeing it. One of the great things that's going on is men are maturing, and they're being forced to, and so the dynamics are changing. There's a lot of men in their 30s and 40s who have no interest in being married. And there's nobody making marriage worth it, because the idea so far has been that if a man gets a woman, he is experiencing some level of privilege, some level of grace is being bestowed upon him.
A woman's touch.
It is such an honor that he gets to marry one of those. And I'm not saying that's not true, but I am saying, and there's a whole bunch of other things that go along with it, that once the damsel becomes a queen, is like there is a whole bunch more that that queen has responsibility for, that if she doesn't know that she has those responsibilities, and she just thinks that everybody is going to keep treating her from a position of her privilege, she's in for a rude awakening, because she'll never feel good enough about herself, first of all, because she's not doing anything to feel good about herself. I was doing a workshop one time for young men, and trying to explain to moms some stuff about young men, how they work. They used to call it all puberty, right? When we just had a more simple lifestyle, we used to say they hit puberty and they get crazy and they do crazy stuff, they break stuff, and blah, blah, blah. Now we call them criminals. Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer would have been in youth authority for sure. But like moms are, and the women that I was dealing with at the time are, they want to make it about husbands and how come my husband and blah, blah, blah. And what was clear was that these women forgot that they have a responsibility in life of how they are with men. And if you're a certain way with men, men are going to respond a certain way. We're not, and they had been convinced in their lifetimes, and these were women that were close to what my age is now. This is 20 years ago. And they go, well, how come he has lost interest in sex? And I said, well, because how much time do you put in being interesting when it comes to sex? And they're like, what? Because they were convinced by their predecessors that men just want to have sex. Just like,
right.
Just anytime that a man wants to have sex, just have sex with him because he always wants to have sex. Like there's nothing that sparks a man's interest that he just wants to have sex. And so, and these women had lost touch with the fact that, some men think sex should be interesting. And that would be something that would maybe prolong his life.
Yeah.
Literally. Is him being interested in sex. And it would be one of those things that you might be interested in doing, is keeping sex interesting, not just be available for it if he feels like it. And as you can imagine, it was met with some irresponsibility, because they had all fooled themselves into believing that there's nothing required of them except for saying yes.
Yeah.
And so because they shouldn't have to. And this is coming off of a generation of bashing men for objectifying women, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is total bullshit, because the makeup industry says that women objectify women and women objectify themselves, and they turn themselves into things that they're not intentionally. And then they blame men for their behavior, and it was all men's fault. And now, that's getting turned around pretty well nowadays, because women are very clear that, you see women doing all kinds of things that they can't blame men for what they're doing anymore, because they're doing it to themselves. They're starting to take responsibility for, I don't know how many men I've never met. I've only met one man. I've met one man who actually recommended breast augmentation for his woman.
Mm-hmm.
I've met one.
Mm-hmm.
I've met a lot more than one woman that's had that done because of how she felt about herself. So these women are taking responsibility for it now, their own objectification, so they can feel whatever they want to feel about themselves. But that's, the last few years. It's like, and it's that responsibility that prepares you to be married. It's like, if you can't take responsibility for yourself and how you're going to look at things and how you're going to interact, you're not ready. Because once you get to the point of being married, you've got to be responsible for what a marriage does. And that affects the entire community. How you get along with your partner affects your children, your grandchildren, your neighbors' children, other couples. When you're married, other couples look to you to see about being married. It's like, and that's a community responsibility you have. You're not married in a void. You're always an example. And if you're not ready to take that responsibility on, you're not ready to be married. It's not me and the knight and the damsel running off happily ever after. You have to be ready to be exposed. The armor's got to come off. The agreements have to be made. You walk through the village together. They see me with her with me, and they see how we are. They see how we look at each other. They hear how we talk to each other. And when I'm with the men, they see how I talk about her. They see how she talks about me. And all that stuff is training on being married.
That's interesting in one respect, because it reminds me of how we talk about being on a men's team and how we want to be looked at, or like the way we talk to each other, it's supposed to make men want to do that, similar, like join a men's team, similarly like get married, I guess, so another question that's coming up, sort of, this links back to that thing that overwhelmed me earlier, this discussion of memes and words and stuff, is like, throughout this, we're occasionally like talking about the health of the men or the health of the women as a community. So where do you get your sense of that? Because like that's, I think, because of course we can, because it seems important. Like even though I can best control my own behavior, I'm part of a greater community. So how do you gauge the health of your own community?
Well, the shittiest thing about that is this, and I mean this in seriousness and in fun.
Yeah.
I never crave broccoli.
Okay.
Health is that hard. So you have to have some criteria for it. Hence the question is that hard to answer. It's like, well, first of all, Mark, you got to eat broccoli. So there's some things that you have to accept. One of them is you have to accept you have a place. There is a place for you.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be the place that you wish it was, but you have a place and you belong there. There's things that, no matter what the place is in the community, it's yours. There's something to do, something that must get done, And it's your responsibility to do that. The way that you elevate your status is based on your performance in that place. So you're never stuck in that place.
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing that changes is based on your effort in whatever position you've accepted that you have.
Okay.
Men or women. Men or women. The criteria is the same. Women have their place. There's always an alpha. There's always an alpha because you have to indicate, you have to have a measuring tool for the place.
Okay.
So somebody's got to decide what time dinner is.
Okay.
Right? Somebody decides what time dinner is. Somebody backs up the person who's deciding what dinner is. Now you have alpha and alpha. Then you got the people who agree with the people who are deciding what time dinner is. Now you got beta.
Huh.
Right?
All right.
And then you go to the other end of it. You got to say that there's some things that aren't acceptable.
Yeah.
Hey, there's some shit we don't do around here.
Yeah.
And here's the line. And at some point, if you fall off the line, you're out.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't get to participate.
Right.
If you're not, and we are strong enough to draw that line. If the cost of keeping you is too expensive, we're not going to keep you.
Right. That's a little like the discussion earlier about whether it's dealing with when people get emotional or expressing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like there's some things you do, some things you can't do. I mean, like I was taught early on, it normally came with a tap on the leg. You've talked enough. That's how.
Yeah.
Give somebody else a chance.
Yeah.
So there's ways of teaching these things that aren't necessarily, just always verbal. They're not always humiliating. They're not always embarrassing.
Yeah.
But they get called, and then they're understood. And if it goes over time, it gets understood over time. And that's what we're struggling with as a culture right now. Is we're changing the rules.
Yeah.
And but nobody is willing to take the responsibility of what we're changing them into.
Yeah.
We're willing to say that we're not going to follow this rule. It's like what you said about the Snow White isn't going to be laying around waiting asleep anymore. Well, if you're eating a poison apple, she didn't really have a choice about waiting around now, did she? That just tells me that the damsel in distress is talking about the damsel in distress. Here's a girl in distress who's trying to make rules about ridiculous ideas because of her maturity level.
Yeah.
I don't know how old the person was, but she might have been 60 and saying shit like that, which would have been ridiculous because she changed the context of it to be negative.
Right.
So we got to have the maturity to not only make the rules, but to state what they are. And then there's got to be the strength to enforce them. It's like, well, that's ugly. That's going to hurt. That's generally why you'll see that old people are generally quiet, because they have had to do the things that are very painful that keep communities together.
Is your perception of how we're doing with that, when you do you look at your own community as like a small town or small group, or do you look at like fucking the country and what's on television? Like how do you yeah, I mean, this is very much, I think, in Men to Men Weekend you talk about filtering out the bullshit, right?
Mm-hmm.
The bullshit. So like if you're taking in information about the whole country, which part is actual information that you can, add to your stash, and which part is the bullshit?
Well, I am the kind of person, or at least I think I'm the kind of person. When I walk into the room, people know I'm there. I'm not invisible. I just, whatever energy I've got is noticeable. It's just the blessing and curse of who I am. Now, I have to take the responsibility of what I want to be. What do I want people to see? I could come in and I could be a irresponsible, chaotic, rabble rouser, and I enjoy that stuff. I mean, I really do. I like to, when I'm with
rouse some rabble.
I like to rouse some rabble for sure, and I like to do it. And I like to have fun doing it, and I enjoy the chaos and all of those things. But then there's a time and a place, and that's a learned behavior, and it comes with maturity. So it's not always the role of a older gentleman like myself to be rabble rousing all the time, and I really feel a loss when I got to leave it up to one of the younger guys to do the rabble rousing and be available to settle things down, because that's what the older men are for. Okay, I know how to calm this down. I sure wish I could have been the one to liven it up, but I got to calm it down now. So we all got our place, but because I've had enough life experience to calm it down, not let it get out of hand. I can normally stop things before somebody gets broken. So we all have that. We all have our place in it, and you got to take. So when I'm at when I'm at the place we're staying, when I walk outside, I'm noticed, but I got to take responsibility for what's being seen. So when there's a bunch of little kids around, am I sitting out there farting, bellowing, scratching my balls, and picking my nose? Well, if nobody knows me there, I can take that attitude if I want. Or I can say, you know what? I'm being noticed. People can see. I should probably conduct myself in a particular way so that the young ones know how to conduct themselves outdoors when they go outdoors. Because they're just being little kids, being all wild and crazy, and I'm not going to go up to them and go like, hey, don't pick your nose, kid. But if they don't see me do it, when they get a couple more years on them and somebody else corrects them, they'll go like, oh, I've seen that before.
So that's an example of seeing it just in your community. Mm-hmm. You can sort of see some things in your community.
We're making a mistake when we have this attitude, I'm going to get them to. Mm-hmm. It's like, rather than how a community works and how maturity works, is I'm going to be an example of. So the responsibility falls on the elders. And what's great about being an elder is you have such a wider variety of things you can do. Because young guys are way self-conscious and only can let certain parts of themselves show and are afraid that you're going to catch them in a mistake. And they're faking it. They don't know if they're doing anything right. And they're pretending like they know everything and they're doing everything right. And on the inside, an old guy is just chuckling and waiting for it. and it's fun. It's fun being an elder and in the community and watching it go on and going like, I wonder how long he's going to get away with this. Because it's coming down. It's not going to hold up. And you have enough years to know it's not going to hold up. I was at a drug rehab and I was talking to one of the counselors, and the counselor said, la, la, la. And I said, la, la. They go, you don't know that. They told me that. They go, you don't know that. And I looked at her, and I was feeling particularly feisty that day. I go, you want to bet? They're like, what? I go, I'll bet you money. I'll bet you money I know that. How could you know that? It hasn't happened yet, and blah, blah, blah. I said, because that's what happens. And she was like, well, no, but she wanted to treat life like everybody's different. Okay, everybody's different, but everybody's the same too. That's what you learn when you're old. Yeah. Glory to everybody. We're all different, and we're all the same. So you know what's going to happen. You're not going to be surprised by much by the time you get much over 50. It's going to be like going, oh, God, this is happening again. And if you're really smart, you see it coming and you leave before it happens so you don't get hurt by it. It's like, oh, this is getting a little too out of hand. I think I'll leave. So I forgot where that all started, but that's where it ended.
Well, it was curious about starting interacting with the community, and the health of the community, like we were talking about broccoli. But then it was then it was also just sort of I was thinking about the size of the community that you can actually make observations about.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you say, so when we say like people are entitled now or people are getting less mature, like are we talking about just in our personal experience, or is it like, or how much of our experience is the culture, the stuff that we're like trying to filter out of like media, and how much of that is bullshit?
Well, here's the impossible thing for me in the media.
Yeah.
I don't know who the media is, what the media's agenda is, and who they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So there's part of the media where nobody's responsible for anything and everything's happening in a void and it's just happening.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of information is presented that way. Like,
Yeah.
there's no cause. It's all effect. And we're being affected. And nobody is willing to say, blah, it's this. And then there's the finger pointers who can't, and whoever they're pointing the finger at, it doesn't lead to whatever the conclusion is.
Right.
And so the media isn't making much sense to me right now, because the stories as they're told don't have a beginning, middle, and an end. There's no linear way to follow it. So there's some big chunks of the story not being told.
Okay. Yeah.
Because that's kind of the nature of the story. It's got a beginning. There's like, they set off on a hike. They started climbing up the hill. They wove around, and they ended up at the top. Right? And so I don't trust the media, just because, not because of the information, but because it's not complete.
Right.
And so it's hard to sit there and point at whatever you're going to point at. And so what you get is snippets of ideas that trigger emotion, and which can't be trusted.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, oh, wow. Because if you start asking yourself, why are they telling me that? Now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like here, they're like more currently, it's a year ago we're hearing all this stuff about the Ukraine. Now we're hearing about everything they told us about the Ukraine isn't true. And it's like either side of that story. Why are they telling me that?
Yeah.
Why of all the things, these are gigantic media-driven companies. Why are they telling me that?
Yeah, and maybe it, so that sort of adds some perspective, because you talked about they can manipulate using words, and it's like who's they? Well, it's these big companies, these big media companies, but also maybe if the stories they're telling are incomplete, that also could tell us that that they're not telling this. Like, I mean, from what we were just talking about before about like judging a partner, if a partner's trying to manipulate you, you don't want really, they're not mature, or so similarly, like we could extrapolate that the media is full of immature, or there's like, we could judge the immaturity of where we are all at as a society based on like, well, our media doesn't seem very mature.
Yeah. Well, you figure like it's a high level of immaturity if we know that we're creating products that are destroying the planet that we need to survive. That's just immaturity. Back in the 70s, it was air. It's like, we got to do something about polluting the air because this is becoming unbreathable.
Mm-hmm.
And so minimally what they did is they got the color out of the stuff they're polluting the air with. I don't know if they got all the lead out, but but at least they got the color out of it, so at least the sky looks blue again.
Jesus. Okay.
What do we know?
Yeah.
What do we know?
Yeah.
And you can get into any of all that crazy stuff. So in the meantime, as a human, it's like, where do I want to have impact? And am I putting myself in the position where I can have that impact? That's why when this knight in shining armor stuff came up in my mind, and I was just getting a little too obsessive about it, I called you. I said, Dittmer, we got to do something because this stuff's driving me crazy. This idea, because I really see that the issue is that we're holding on to portions of these old stories that are keeping our men from maturing in their relationships, and they're getting involved and remaining too immature for too long to have effective relationships to build societies with. Because the man and woman relationship and how that functions is what society is built on.
Yep.
And so when the men aren't mature enough, because for all the reasons that we're not, and the women aren't mature enough because of all the reasons they're not, they're trying to pretend they can define the other person's responsibilities while they're not taking any responsibility for the decisions they're making. They're all too immature.
And then if you're like myself in the online argument, once you instead of like acknowledging failure, the another option rather than acknowledge failure is to deny responsibility or try to put it on the other person.
Yeah.
And try to survive that way. It's kind of a survival.
Well, and what I'm saying is that we are already at such a deficit of personal responsibility that when all these people are saying whatever they're saying, especially when it comes to local behavior, I mean, we have got to step up our involvement in our communities.
Yeah.
We have got to be vigilant in what we're doing, and we got to support each other in doing it.
Yeah.
But that means we have to have the discipline to adhere to rules.
Yeah.
And we got to make the rules clear.
Yeah.
I got to go.
I was just I'm laughing because I'm thinking like, what's the best conclusion? And I'm like, oh, that's it. That's the best conclusion right there. Hey, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.
Hopefully more times to come. But I hope we got it. I hope we got into that Knights in Shining Armor the way like you wanted. To be continued. But it sounded. You know what it sounded like though is that like man, you've got to. I think that experiences like people who are happily married or who've been through it the way kind of you and your wife have, like where you've been married a long time and are like, yeah, I'm it's difficult, but I'm here, or like, they're it's not all fucking happily ever after, but I did it, we've done it, I respect her, she respects me. It's rare, so it's a way like I think you feel like sort of. It's a responsibility to share what's working or share what works.
And that I know the being protected by the ferocity of a woman.
Yeah.
I've accepted that as a part of my life.
Yeah, you've been vulnerable. You've been
had
your armor off.
This woman has exposed herself in a way that she is so trustworthy that my security is high.
Yeah.
And which makes me brave enough for us to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Because there's probably not a few years ago where this conversation couldn't be had.
Yeah.
Except for I keep talking to her, me and her keep talking about these things. And she's glad that I'm here to have this conversation with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Thanks again.
Do it again.
Hey.